dramatic race in the season opener at Doha, round two at Yokohama got underway with practice. A couple things had changed since the previous round. Kofi Koro would be sitting out the second round in Yokohama for Aurel Mazario, as Pietro Batia finally makes his debut in the second Catorce car. He would be taking the lead car for the event, with Mazario taking the second slot in the second car. Other than that, Asia Road Racing were cautiously optimistic for a good result here in their home Grand Prix, alongside the Sakura Katana team. With the new investment for the Sakura group, they were looking to hope to score a good result here at their home race as well, although their engine troubles might yield a potential problem. Rossini were still baffled to try and figure out what caused the failure on Sarian's car, though, and Hyundai were just happy to have scored a win and weren't optimistic on repeating defeat again. After a dramatic qualifying session for the Yokohama Grand Prix, however, it was quite an interesting sight at the front of the grid, with a series of Noah's Ark formation through the top 10 positions of the grid. The two Steinmans leading the charge, with Chapman ahead of Holtz once again, Sarin getting the better of teammate Wexler, Sharp ahead of Sirikov, the two Sakuras doing well in qualifying, with Javier ahead of North, and the two Hyundais of Oliveira ahead of Aki Lipinen, last week's winner. The Flying Richter Graf had to settle for 11th ahead of Wolfgang Schmidt and Samuel Blanc 13th. Teammate Flores was 14th, showing good pace in that car. Atia, fully fit, was 15th. Mazario 17th, backing up Catorce's decent pace in practice. The two BMWs took row 10 all to themselves, with Woodford, Moreno, and then the two Asia Road Racing cars at the back of the grid. The road racing cars having a particularly difficult time in qualifying, just simply not being able to find the balance in the car, and the car just struggling with the first sector corners entirely. The two Sakura's, however, were looking optimistic despite their engine being down on power, although the Rossinis overnight discovered a potential oil leak in their engines and hastily made a repair to try and fix the problem before race day. Although they kept it quiet, as they didn't want their rivals to know they would be down on power for the race. Pre-race drama was over, the lights went out, and the race began for the Yokohama Grand Prix, with the Steinmans getting a flying start from the front row to easily lead into the first corner, with North managing to pull a fast one on Nikolai Surikov into turn 1, going around the outside of the Russian into turn 1. The Flying Rick de Graaf was proving his quality already as a rookie, moving from a 11th up to P8 on the opening sector of the lap. But further around the lap, there was trouble, as Maria Gonzalez collided with de Graaf's teammate Lucia Flores, while at the same time, Siri Lundqvist, completely unrelated to the previous incident, ran wide going down the hill to the final corner and into the grass, and then proceeded to hit the wall. Her BMW Sauber completely wrecked in the process, and triggering a safety car. With that out of the way, it miraculously saved Maria Gonzalez, who was able to pit and fix the damage. However, on the restart, things became apparent that the super soft tires were starting to fade, as the Flying Rick de Graaf once again began to put the front runners under pressure on the soft compound tire, the first man in the field to be running on them. But the rest of the field began to snake through the opening sector in a single file line, passing proving to be very difficult on the restart at the Yokohama circuit. Further back, Kayohisha Bashir, the Japanese hopeful, was trying to make his name known as he was slowly trying to make progress, having pitted under the safety car onto the hard medium tire. Further around on the restart lap, de Graaf finally got his chance, making the move and easily getting by Aki Lipinen, who couldn't hold it around the outside and ran wide, falling back into the clutches of his teammate and Oliveira for 12. De Graaf was really starting to prove he was a talent of the future and a talent of the right now. Wexler, having managed to get by Holt while all this was happening, was now beginning to put pressure on the Steinman of Harry Chapman. The two of the most dominant men of the series began to duke it out as Cena Jono's Hamrin's day began to get even worse as his car began to fail and his suspension gave up on him, taking Hamrin out of the race. A disappointment for the Asia Road Racing team, their home Grand Prix going downhill with Bashir 20th and Hamrin now out. Further, a couple laps after Hamrin went out, Nina Holt began the pit stop cycle, being the first front runner to pit onto the soft tire that DeGraff was using to much effect so far in the first stint. Schmidt was also doing the same thing, slowly beginning to catch up to the Dutchman rookie. As DeGraff began to show that his tire call was the right one, as he managed to make a brilliant move down the start-finish straight into turn 1 on Nikolai Surikov in a Drago. The Panthers' tires were clearly fading as Wolfgang Schmidt began to hound the Russian as well, neatly getting by across the right-hand turn over the bridge, while DeGraff, on the other hand, pulled a masterclass move around the outside of veteran Jenny North to take 5th place on the road. DeGraff was simply flying, living up to his Flying Rick DeGraff moniker already, as Schmidt also began to try and follow the Dutchman's footsteps to try and see if they could gain an advantage on their tires, as Surikov and Lipinen gave up the ghost on their strategy, and Nilo Sarin's engine also gave up the ghost, the Rossini engine blowing in a big cloud of black smoke, dropping some oil on the track just on the outside line of the bridge, which could cause a problem. While that was happening, Schmidt managed to muscle his way by North up into 5th, and DeGraff now running 4th, as several cars pitted while they saw the smoking Rossini making his way around the track, in anticipation of a potential yellow due to the oil all over the track. Nothing came of it, but Chapman, Sharp, North, and Olivier all proceeded to pit that lap in anticipation of it, with the Steinman getting out first, Sharp losing out to teammate Surikov, and Chapman also losing out to teammate Nina Holtz in the process, and Javier Vasquez, who had also pitted before Chapman had, and gained an advantage, leaving Wexler out in front on his own. That wouldn't last much longer, as Wexler was due in the very next lap. The Rossini diving into the pit lane to change his tires, and Rick DeGraff swooped past on the start-finish straight to lead in only his second race start. A brilliant result, a brilliant debut season for DeGraff was already proving to be even better, as DeGraff cleanly led in the lead in the Gold Drago, with Wolfgang Schmidt following behind second. His teammate Lucia Flores was also flying, proving that the Drago had very solid tire wear. Someone who wasn't flying any further was Jeremy Woodford in the Firestorm. The Firestorm's gearbox giving up the ghost, and he was out. While that was happening, Kaiuhisha Bashir was finally making himself known to the crowd and to the public at large after a fairly anonymous race in Doha, where Bashir managed to overtake Lucia Flores, promoting himself up into 6th place on the road. Having made his stop underneath the safety car, he was good to go. He was good to only have to make one more pit stop during the race, while Nina Holtz began to try and track the Japanese driver down, being the first car to pit under green since the safety car. While Bashir was trying to hold off position, however, contact was made with Javier Vasquez. Vasquez receiving a puncture in the incident, and Bashir, the rookie, from wing damage, forcing both of them to slowly crawl back around to the pit lane as cars began to plow by them. While that was going on, Aki Lipinen was finally catching back up to the two Panthers after his late pit stop. as the two crash victims of Vasquez and Bashir sought the attention of their teams in the pit lane. Vasquez getting a set of new boots on, and Bashir getting a set of new boots and a new front wing in the process, still emerging in front of the Spanish veteran. Both drivers would have a lot of work to do to try and regain ground in the race, given after the incident. While de Graaf continued to lead, still not showing any outward signs of needing to pit at all. The same followed for the driver behind, Wolfgang Schmidt. While those two were cleanly out in the lead, Chapman and Holtz began to duel for what was effectively the lead of the race. Both drivers on fresher tires than the cars in front of them, and both wanting to maintain superiority in the Steinman team going forward. Eventually, Chapman, with a bold move around the outside into turn one, managed to take the lead of the two Steinman cars going forward in the race. As they were making their way through traffic, however, smoke began to billow out of the Rossini of Dieter Wexler. The Rossini engine had also blown, suffering the same oil leak and fire that took out teammate Nilo Sarian. He had just enough momentum going down the hill to limp the car into the pit lane, and he was out. Wexler would not score any points today. A truly disastrous day for Rossini. Meanwhile, while Wexler was throwing his helmet and storming out of the garage, Wolfgang Schmidt finally made his move, or attempted to, on Rick de Graaf, but the Dutchman held firm, cleanly holding the lead until Harry Chapman came along, passed Wolfgang Schmidt, and then easily overtook the Flying Dutchman to take the lead of the Japanese Grand Prix, with de Graaf slotting in second still. And then, while the cameras were following a pit stop for Iker Vidal further behind, Rick de Graaf ended up in the wall on the entrance to the bridge. The front of his car thoroughly buried in the tire wall. He was fine, but his race was run. Although he had shown himself to be a potential star of the future, in only his second race, no less. But with the safety car out, pit stops happened for the rest of the field, and a surprising thing emerged, with Wolfgang Schmidt getting a better stop than Harry Chapman to take the effective lead of the race. It was unlikely that Schmidt was going to be able to hold on, but he was leading his first laps for quite a long time. And the Jaguar team were looking confident going for the rest of the race, with Schmidt on the hardest tire available, the medium tire, and not having to stop again, whereas most of the field behind him would have to stop again at least once. It would be a very interesting strategy to see if Schmidt could hold on and potentially score an unlikely win or a podium at the very least. As Aki Lipinen stayed out on the initial safety car, with his team not ready to receive him, and then he proceeded to pit a couple laps later, wanting to have a slight offset in his tires compared to the rest of the field to hopefully gain an advantage. As Maria Gonzalez also did the same thing, offsetting her tires from teammate Wolfgang Schmidt as well to see if she could also gain an advantage as well in the second half of the race. On the restart, however, Schmidt proceeded to get a poor getaway and was close to getting swarmed into turn one. However, the German managed to just hold off the German car behind him going through the first sector on the restart. As the field began to fly through the first sector, Schmidt's tires, stone cold from the long safety car, were not willing to switch on, and he began to soon be mobbed by the rest of the field. Further back, many other fast cars who were trapped further back in the pack were finding it difficult to get their tires to switch on, let alone make moves on the slower cars in front. As Jenny North found out to her frustration trying to get by Pracha Patia. Meanwhile, further ahead, Chapman made the move stick into the hairpin, relieving Wolfgang Schmidt of the lead he once held. And further behind, although he wouldn't have time to deal with that for long, as Nina Holtz also proceeded to do the same thing into turn one on the very next lap, demoting Schmidt from first down to third in the span of 30 seconds. Although Schmidt was playing the long game here and was hoping that his tire gamble would still work. Nikolai Surikov was also on the same gamble and was directly behind Schmidt, who was holding up his teammate Sharp for the time being. For several cars further in the back were also running the same strategy, and strategy was about to become the talking point for the rest of the race. As Sharp muscled her way by Schmidt to take third place and the podium for the time being. The race can, as the tires finally began to switch on for the hard tire runners. Schmidt and Surikov began to try and desperately hold on, waiting for the other tire compounds to slowly fade away while their tires stayed perfectly good. As Surikov, ironically, was playing rear gunner for Wolfgang Schmidt, trying to hold off a charging Anna Oliveira and the charging Sakura of Jenny North. Zurikov's car was faster, but his tires were slower, which were somewhat canceling out the advantage that the Hyundai and the Katana had behind him. It would be an interesting battle, except Surikov couldn't hold on, and Olivier managed to outdrag Surikov into turn one, taking the place off of the Russian for the time being. As more trouble was soon to come, though, as the pit stop cycle began. The pit lane speeds were adjusted at the beginning of the season to make the pit lane slower to allow more strategic variance in strategy. However, the Yokohama pit lane was only slowed very marginally, and it began to show as later on Harry Chapman, who was the first front runner to pit, managed to pit, come out in the middle of the field, and was simply lighting the timing screens on fire with hot lap after hot lap. Nina Holtz soon came in and responded to her teammate's charge, pitting for the Super Salt tire as well. Surikov, while this was all going on, managed to overtake Wolfgang Schmidt and was now leading the race with just over 10 laps to go. However, a charging Chapman and Holtz were showing that it was unlikely that they were going to hold on. Chapman and Holtz cleanly overtaking the cars running in the midfield, passing BMWs and Viking Hearts, and then Javier Vasquez as well in the process. While teammate Jenny North pitted for Super Soft tires to try and make it to the end and see if she could steal a point at the end of the race. Further, while Schmidt eventually was caught by the two Steinmans, who were desperate to try and get by each other and also Schmidt to take the win. Chapman was in the lead and had track position, but Holtz had fresher tires than him, and then down the straight they overtook Schmidt and Holtz still harrying behind her teammate, desperate to try and make a move to take the lead of the race. Javier Vasquez, while that was going on, decided to take a trip off the road, but proceeded to lose only a little bit of time and hold on to 5th place. As Surikov was unable to hold off the soft shod runners, the soft shod Steinmans, with the two Steinmans easily taking the lead off of the Russian. Surikov was now running 3rd, but could still hold on to a podium, but had to hold off a fired off Wolfgang Schmidt behind. While Surikov was thinking of that, Holtz was thinking of the win and the 25 points that came with it. She continued to hound her teammate as the laps began to tick down. 6 laps to go, and then looking to turn 1 yielded nothing. Then with 5 to go, while the cameras saw Anna Oliveira overtake Bashir to deny the Japanese driver his first career points, Holtz managed to overtake Chapman down the start-finish straight, denying Chapman the lead. denying Chapman the win that he so desperately wanted for his title chances, with both Rossini's out. Javier Vasquez was also in a bit of a teammate battle. Having locked up his tires, teammate Jenny North was charging and making a move to try and overtake him as well, which he did, going around the outside of the hairpin, sticking it out, and simply overtaking Vasquez down the start finish straight to take fifth place. With that done, North began to try and charge to see if she can make a move on Wolfgang Schmidt to get an unbelievable fourth. While further down the field, Anna Oliveira was also charging, managing to make the overtake on Maria Gonzalez as the laps began to count down. Further back and not being noticed much by the cameras was Zoe Sharp. The Panther driver was having an absolute nightmare of a race going forward, having gone from being on the podium at one point to having a very bad strategy call, where she proceeded to pit multiple times after the safety car due to either having worn tires or the team having worn tires incorrectly chosen by her team, or proceeding to have other issues as well, which dropped her to 17th place out of contention. But the day ended up belonging to Nina Holtz, who swept through the final corners down the hill, past the cherry blossoms and the grandstands to take the win in Yokohama, taking the 25 points that went with it. Chapman came home a close second, with Surikov managing to hold off Wolfgang Schmidt to take third place and the podium spot. Schmidt ended up fourth, North a solid fifth with teammate Vasquez sixth, Lippinen, Blanc, and Olivier 8th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, Gonzalez 10th, Flores recovered to 11th, Bashir a frustrating but at least credible 12th place, along with the rest of the field, which ended up with 18 cars finishing the race in the end. A great race, but things will be interesting going into the next round in Beijing in 2 weeks' time.